In Denmark, everyone speaks English, and that is from the little kids to the oldest grandma to beggars and beyond. It's absolutely crazy. I am a well-traveled guy and I have never come across something like this. You can easily, and I mean really easily, get along with just English. Despite that, I strongly believe that learning Danish is an excellent idea, and in this video I'll tell you the 7 key reasons why you should also learn Danish yourself. I am Mario, and on this channel I help expats living in Denmark to save money, invest well, and live an overall rich and happy life in here. I have been in Denmark now for over 12 years and finally I can speak fluent Danish, to the point that there's a Danish translation of this video with me fully doing the whole video in Danish, link down in the video description, or you can check it out over here. That said, the rest of the video is gonna be in English. Number 1 is to impress people. And this is not about the impressing, like the fact that you speak Danish, not about impressing the staff in the burger service or the teacher in the kindergarten. It's about kind of those crucial moments. For example, a practical story. When I bought the house, the one I'm shooting this video on, I wanted a specific type of mortgage and I was not getting that mortgage at the beginning. But I learned from experience that, for instance, and also from friends, that if you have connection to Denmark, I mean, if you can show that you're planning to stay here for the long term and you're not gonna go away, that is kind of a crucial factor for banks to decide whether they should give you the mortgage that you want or not, and they would see you in a better light than a normal expat. So for my next bank meetings, I spoke in Danish for just the first 1 to 2 minutes, not for the whole bank meeting, but just for those 1 or 2 minutes. And I immediately stood out in that context again, for mortgages, connection to Denmark is vital. Banks, would say, okay, these guys, 1 out of 100 expats that come to Denmark and want to buy a house, go to them and talk to them in Danish. So I immediately stood out and I got the mortgage that I wanted. I repeated the same trick for job interviews, another high leverage moment. It's not that speaking Danish will make you get better jobs, or maybe yes, more on that later, but at least you will immediately stand out. If hiring managers will interview 20 expats and you're the only one who actually speaks Danish, it would send a message. Number 2 is to unlock Denmark. And back to the house buying example. You can also buy a house without speaking Danish, but you need a translator or a lawyer to guide you through all the documents and the correspondence and agreements and the contracts and all that type of stuff. It's totally doable, but it's better if you can read all these things yourself. At the same time, if you want to invest in stocks or you need to do bureaucratic things as registering the kids in the kindergarten or in the school, Google Translate will only get you this far. And on top of that, Denmark has a lot of cultural events. In Copenhagen, for instance, you have exhibitions or events and talks and a lot of social happenings, and they're often all of them in Danish. There are many in English, but there are many more in Danish as well. And if you speak the language, you can unlock that whole extra level of things to do that before you couldn't. Then something that is not appreciated enough is that in Denmark there's a ton of Facebook groups or Reddits or little forums where we're gonna be having a little community where we talk about one specific topic. And normally there's a lot more information available in those groups than it would be in, for example, in the generic expats in Copenhagen Facebook group, which, don't get me wrong, it's great. But in Danish, you have 3-4 of these groups like this, but multiplied, and for example, one just on investing and one just on housing and one just of this and that. So that's a big boon if you can actually access those things and be participant in the discussions. Number 3 is to challenge yourself. I used to think that I was good in languages before I moved to Copenhagen, and just for context, I got into basic conversational German in just 6 months, and then another 6 months I managed to get to B2 level, and that's pretty good. And then I studied Japanese for a few years. I learned all the kanji, passed a very tough exam, can still speak some Japanese now. But when I moved to Denmark, Danish just completely shattered that self-belief. I went and completed all the classes, I tried multiple approaches, but nothing was working. I still, sucked at Danish years and years later. I remember being in CBS on my first week in Denmark and finding it absolutely insane that there was a guy that had been in Denmark for 6 years and he didn't speak Danish at all. Fast forward myself to 6 years later and my Danish still really sucked. So it was really embarrassing, really hurt my self-esteem. So it became a matter of pride, of my own challenge to myself to say, hey, I'm going to learn this language. I want to be stopping to be the odd man out who, just doesn't speak Danish, and just embrace that. If you're curious about the specific approach I took to learn Danish myself, there's going to be a link down in the video description for a whole article explained. But the short version is that I have been doing a lot of Anki cards, or say flashcards to learn vocabulary, a lot of vocabulary. And then I have done over 100 one-on-one conversational lessons via something called italki, where there's also a link down in the video description. That, again, multiplied over a few years, that's basically what helped me make the final leap. Number 4 is to progress in your career. And you can get around with just English for most white collar or office jobs here in Denmark. For example, in Maersk, where I work, We have so many expats at the office that we ever hardly, hear someone speaking Danish. But I mean, there's no doubt that Danish will help you, even in a big company like Maersk. For example, I have been in meetings in Carlsberg and in Maersk, Carlsberg where I worked before, where we had to speak Danish only. I work in procurement, for example, and I had to speak with certain truckers who, they could speak some basic English or they could speak English good enough, but when it came to business, they were more comfortable if we could have the conversation in Danish. And it's not that everyone is like that, but the fact that you can then participate in those discussions and lead the discussions and make them more comfortable and show the vendor, in my case, that I care about you and I'm speaking your language so we can feel more eye to eye, that really helped in the discussions. Still common also, I would say, for top managers to be majority Scandinavian, or again, almost Scandinavian in a way. So again, just speaking Danish will also help you unlock one more layer of connection between you and them. And then there are also some specific jobs where learning Danish or speaking Danish is a must. So for example, if you want to work in consulting, there's many consulting cases where they ask you to speak one of the Scandinavian languages. If you want to work in the government, if that's your thing, I mean, of course, you also need to speak Danish as well. Certain types of doctors and specialists, again, you need to speak Danish. So again, if you want to unlock those opportunities, you then need to go and learn the language. Reason number 5 is when having kids. If you have kids in Denmark and you're planning to stay here for more than 2-3 years, you must learn Danish. Like in all cases, you can again get away with not knowing Danish, but you just miss a lot of opportunities or complicate yourselves. For example, like daycare, kindergarten and school are in Danish. I mean, unless you send your kids to the international school. But at the end of the day, like if you want to be able to talk with other parents, to understand the kids and their friends when they talk with each other, if you want to participate in social events and have like a good discussion with the teacher, it helps a lot to speak in Danish. This is even more the case if you have multiple kids and they speak Danish with each other, that's totally a thing. And beyond like school, if you want to send your children to activities like football, swimming or horseback riding or whatever you want, most of the times those activities will be in Danish. And while of course the teachers can be very accommodating to you, and if you're also participating in those activities and say things in English, as I have seen in the swimming classes with my children, with other parents, I think it's great that you can show that you can speak the language, because then your kid is not separated. So do it for them and not just for yourself as well. Number 6 is to level up your social life. I love expats, and my best friends in CBS, early in my career and all the way up to now, I would say, are expats. But there's a thing with expats, and is that many of them eventually leave Denmark, or many they go to another country, or they go to their country where they're from. If they have kids here in Denmark, then you have more skin in the game. But overall, having a social focus on expats, or having your focused community of friends as expats, it's a shaky ground, I would say, talking from experience here. My take is that if you stay in Denmark for the long term, you'll soon or later want to start making Danish friends. And it's way easier to make Danish friends if you can speak their language. There's gonna be a link down here for a video on how to make friends in Denmark, but one of the things you should know about friendships in Denmark is that Danes like to hang out in small group of friends, and if there's a group of 4 or 5 friends that you want to join, and they're all in Danish and they all speak Danish, of course they can switch back to English for you if you're a really interesting person, but you just make everything a lot smoother if they don't need to do that for you, and then you can just again participate and learn in Danish and meld them with them. And number 7 is to get citizenship. So if you want to become a Dane, so like a Danish citizen, you need to speak Danish. And this is part of the application process where you need to do 2 exams that are in Danish. So the first one is the language exam, which you need to pass a PD3, I'm pretty sure, or there's a PD2 as well with some exceptions, which is not hard, but again, you just can't wing it if you don't know any Danish. And the second thing is the citizenship exam, which is the exam on Danish culture, Danish values, government, and so on, which is in Danish as well, which again, you can't wing it if you don't speak the language. You can do both without speaking Danish perfectly, but again, at least you need to be good enough. And that's it for now. If you want to see again this video in Danish and hear me saying the same things, but in Danish with a very strong accent, check this video over here. Thanks for watching.